It's often said that the heart of a mother knows her child in ways no one else can. But sometimes even a mother can't fully understand the depths of the battles her child faces, especially when those battles are fought in silence. Today I had the privilege of speaking with a mother who watched her son grow from a boy into a man. A man who fought not just on the battlefield, but in the deepest recesses of his soul. His story is one of pain, redemption, and ultimately total surrender. Before I begin, I want to share how much this story has touched me. I made another video about her son for you to see below, and this time I want to tell her story. Every few weeks I see her, and when I do, I offer her a quick hug and a cheerful greeting of hope. Before I forget, let's do our message too. Then I will tell you the interview. God's love is the foundation of all truth. It is not a fleeting emotion, but an eternal, unwavering characteristic of His very nature. 1 John 4, verse 8 tells us, God is love. This isn't just something He does, it's who He is. The Bible repeatedly reminds us that God loves us with an everlasting love. Jeremiah 31:3. His love is unchanging, constant, and the very essence of His being. Now think about this. God, in all His glory, chose to reach down to us while we were still in sin. Romans 5:8 says, but God demonstrates His own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. This is the depth of His love, not because we earned it, but because He chose to love us, even at our worst. But there's a lie that has been sold to the world, a lie that twists our perception of God's love into something it was never meant to be. This is where Satan's deceptive power comes into play. From the very beginning, his goal was to distort the truth about God. In the Garden of Eden, he asked, did God really say? Genesis 3:1. He planted doubt in Eve's mind, making her question God's goodness. And through that one act of deception, fear, division, and confusion began. Now here's the story I promised you. I sat across from her in the dimly lit room, her hands clasped tightly around a small wooden cross, the same cross her son had carried through every battle. Her eyes were steady, but there was a heaviness in her gaze, something I recognized from my own life. The weight of a mother's love and the weight of a mother's grief, a small photo pinned to her blouse. Tell me about your son, I began, the question hanging between us. She took a deep breath, her voice soft but resolute. He was always a fighter. From the moment he could walk, he was throwing punches at the air, at the walls, at anyone who crossed him. He had a fire inside him, a fire I didn't fully understand, but I knew it came from somewhere deep. But I didn't realize how much that fire would shape his life. Her eyes flickered for a moment, lost in the memories. You see, he grew up with a father who, well, he wasn't the kind of man who nurtured. He taught him how to fight, how to survive, but never how to love. It was all about strength, about proving yourself. Compliments were rare, affection even rarer. Every day it was like he was trying to prove he was good enough, trying to earn something he could never reach. His father was hard and my son took it all in. He became angry. He became an angry soldier before he was ever ready to fight. I nodded, understanding that kind of pain, the kind that silently molds a child into something they're not meant to be. What was it like when he went off to the military? Her voice trembled slightly. It was hard. I thought maybe this would be where he'd finally find himself. But the truth is, he was still carrying that rage, that need to prove he was enough. The military felt like home to him. It was a place where the rules were simple. Fight, survive, don't ever back down. But that rage, it followed him there too. He kept fighting over and over again. She paused, her gaze distant, as if reliving those moments with him. But then, one night, it all changed. He was pinned down in a firefight, and I knew deep down something inside him was about to break. I leaned forward, intrigued. Softly, I asked, "What happened?" "What did he say when he came back?" I offered up a quiet prayer as I waited. The silence stretched as if eternity passed. A shadow crossed her face before she answered. "He called me after that battle. He wasn't the same boy I had sent off to war. He wasn't angry anymore. I could tell by his voice it was softer. He said, 'Mom, I don't know what happened out there, but that night I finally understood. I prayed, and not a church kind of prayer we used to do. Just, I didn't have it anymore, Mom.' All of a sudden, in the middle of that dark field, I was, I asked God to save me from myself, Mom." She clenched the cross tighter, as though the memory was still raw. "I could hear it in his voice," she continued. "He had surrendered, really surrendered this time. After all those years of fighting, after all that boy's rage, he finally gave up his control. And it wasn't just because of this war. He had been fighting someone or something deeper all along, something he'd carried from his childhood." I took a deep breath, processing her words. She continued softly, "And when he came home, was he completely different?" I looked at her face softening. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. She said brokenly, "He was. But the battle wasn't over. You see, surrender isn't just a one-time thing for him. It's not a prayer you say and then it's done. It's a daily choice." I knew that, and he knew that too. But when he came back, he wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was my son. But more than that, he was a man who had found peace. For the first time, he wasn't fighting. He wasn't carrying the weight of the past. He had finally let it go. Her voice cracked slightly as she continued. "He told me that he had learned something that night. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it." That's what he had found. Peace in surrender. He didn't need to fight anymore. God had already won the battle for him. She paused again, tears welling up in her eyes, but there was no sadness on her face. Only something deeper, something more powerful. Hope. She said, "He came home, and he wasn't just home physically. His heart came home too, and that's when I knew. My son had finally found what he'd been searching for all his life." As I listened to her story, I realized this wasn't just a mother's tale. It was a story for all of us. We all have battles to fight, both seen and unseen. But the real question is, will we choose to surrender? Will we let go of the fight and trust in the one who has already won? Her son's journey wasn't just about war, it was about peace. Peace that came when he laid down his weapons. Peace that came through surrender. And peace that is available to all of us if we choose to let go and let God lead us home.